The town may be kind of small, but these folks have big smiles and big hearts, and they know what it is to have simple fun down our way, where old-fashioned singing and homey gatherings make living mighty pleasant.
Love the T-shirt.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I got it from the record label, Last Laugh Records and Almost Ready Records. That they're both run by the same guy, Harry. He has a retail store in Brooklyn.
Really?
He started reissuing all of our vinyl, starting with the first 45, and then most recently put out the Death Travels West vinyl version. Gosh, probably only last year. Maybe it's been 2 years by now.
It's rolling.
Welcome to Abandoned Albums, the documentary podcast where we take a closer look at some albums that may have been forgotten about over time, some albums you might not even know existed, and some new up-and-coming artists we think you should take note of. I'm your host, Keith R. Higgins. And on this episode of Abandoned Albums, Bill Goffrier stops by Thunder Love Studios to have a chat about his band, The Embarrassment.
Walking around pouting like your little sister took your last Oreo. And not a traditional Oreo. No, a limited edition Oreo or seasonal Oreo. They're going to take off the shelf for another year. Did little Natisha take your last Halloween Oreo? You didn't get a chance to say goodbye to that delicious orange frosting? Did little Tyronda take your last ice cream Oreo orange sherbet? That is a summertime flavor. It's fucking embarrassing!
Hailing from the Great Plains of Wichita, Kansas, The Embarrassment, like their contemporaries R.E.M., The Replacements, and Husker Du, helped blaze the trail for what would become college or alternative rock in the early to mid-1980s. Affectionately known as the Embos, their smart, catchy, and quirky songs were a ballast to the moodier songs of early R.E.M. and the more punkish sounds of The Replacements and Husker Du. Unlike those bands, The Embarrassment threw in the towel before finding mainstream success, but that doesn't mean their sound or songs didn't cast a long shadow. The band is the subject of an upcoming documentary called We Were Famous, You Don't Remember, which premieres September 30th in Wichita, Kansas. I recently sat down with guitarist Bill Goffrier to talk about The Embarrassment, whose legacy is the furthest thing from embarrassing. How did The Embarrassment start?
Well, okay. Three of what became the members of the band, we were childhood friends. When I was in third grade here, so I'd only been in Wichita less than a year, and as a little kid, what did I know? But I had one third grade friend who happened to live not too far away in the neighborhood. We were at the same public school, and I went over to his house one day to play, and his next door neighbor was 1 year younger and was out playing in his backyard sandbox, and we made immediate friends with him, and his name was Brent Geisman, and he was playing in the sandbox with a little plastic mummy that was a replica of the Lon Chaney Jr. mummy from the Universal horror movies. And right away, that impressed me because I was a huge monster movie fan. So the fact that he had this, well, that's cool. And then he started talking about his brother was in a rock band, his older brother. And he said, yeah, come, I'll show you. Come in my house. So he shows us the bedroom that he shared with his older brother, Brian, and they had a bunk bed and everything. And there in the room, and I think it was like a mini kit. It had artwork and the name on the drum head. It said the Moon Children, and it had this sci-fi, this alien kind of tentacled creature, all in color on the drum head. And so we're talking about music. I was so impressed, and there's a ukulele in the room, as I remember, and I grabbed it. It's possible I might have already been taking my first guitar lessons, that I had asked, my parents if I could learn to play guitar from this guy that they knew from the local nightclubs. He'd play solo guitar stuff, and he looked just like John Denver. The closest prop nearby was his little pink stuffed elephant, Stuffy. But we started writing a song about, a pink elephant and strumming the ukulele. Like a year or maybe a little more later, both of us our families had moved. we somehow ended up living in the same apartment complex. The back door of the townhouse opens onto this shared courtyard, and everybody that lives in these townhouses and some people in these balcony apartments all had access to the same courtyard. I find out Brent lives exactly across the back door, across the courtyard from me with his mom and sisters and brother. And so we continued, and we kind of blossomed our friendship from that point. We were just neighborhood friends, and probably not even a year later, this new kid shows up with these dark, thick horn rim glasses, and he's carrying around a little music instrument case. And we're kind of like, we weren't bullying types, but it seemed like at first we were sort of maybe even borderline bullying this kid.
Here's a little bit of river logic for you. I was wondering if we should keep on. Because the Force has got a lot of power. To make me feel like. The force will bow. Everything happens. Let's go. Rescues wide. Listen to my body now. I won't be complaining. Oh no. Just let me dance. Oh no. No, the force don't stop. Don't stop it, get enough. No, the force don't stop. Don't stop it, get enough. No, the force don't stop. Don't stop it, get enough. No, the force. This dorky guy was John Nichols, who, went on to become our singer. But we were just getting more and more impressed by his musical taste and knowledge. And so he, when we had spare time, and his mom, he was being raised by a single working mom. So a lot of times his little apartment was just empty, after school, and we could hang out over there, pull out the turntable, and there he had his little collection of records starting to build. And I think 8 tracks. I think so. Between 8 tracks of Kool and the Gang, I can remember seeing that one, and Lou Reed 8 tracks. Then we'd put on 45s and just go through a whole variety of stuff, because this was still pre-punk. So
they're using money from the football fund to buy a movie projector.
This is a honey of a story, but we've got to be careful. Jim, are you sure you have all the facts on this story?
You bet I'm sure. It isn't fair to take the money we save for football uniforms to buy a projector.
Remember, it's only a rumor that the football money is going spent. Did you check up on that?
Oh, it's the football fund, all right.
Does that sound right to you, Francis?
I guess so.
In probably 72, Brent, he had to explain to me who Alice Cooper was, because his brother was into Alice Cooper. And of course, having heard nothing, I didn't even know we were talking about a band or a guy.
Right.
That ended up being the first rock concert we ever went to, was Alice Cooper here in town at the doing the $1 Billion Babies tour with the original band. And, we were changed for life. Thanks to Brent's big brother, Brian, we'd also found our way to David Bowie pretty early on in the glam period. That made a big impression. So, between glam rock and progressive rock, but John Nichols was also buying up like Edgar Winter's Frankenstein and Ringo Starr,
Back Off Boogaloo, and some of and Chicago. What certain things stood out to him that made him, buy these records and then want to, pitch those to us and say, what do you think of this? And I don't know, we'd sit around, the three of us, and talk about it, make fun of it, joke about it, satirize it, whatever. We weren't trying to write any songs or even play any instruments at that point, but it's like we had this ongoing music appreciation little discussion group going, and among all the other dangerous habits we'd get into. And what are you doing with your time? Well, I don't know. We're learning about music, but for what reason? Who knows? I don't think anybody mentioned having a band or anything. But then when punk rock broke,
yeah,
by the time the first Ramones album came out, which I think was pivotal, and as soon as I heard Johnny Ramones, playing, I realized that, well, this is what's going to finally allow me to play my guitar and express myself. I needed the permission of something like Johnny Ramone's playing style. I made that connection, and that became my reference. And I never had the chops or the technique. I just had to eventually grow my own kind of style, and it just led from. I mean, I'm a creative person. I'm mostly a visual artist, and I do think I have a natural talent for songwriting. I had to, just apply my whatever creative skills I had to growing that really basic primitive approach to guitar, and seeing what directions I could push it in that just were interesting to me.
How did you come up with the name The Embarrassment? It's just singular, and it's a very clever name.
Well, that's what we thought. We at this point, and I know, so you can already tell that I can't give an answer without some long winding story. Just ask my wife. When we were coming up with the name, we were kind of in our third or fourth band lineup, during which time, Brent had always been the drummer, and John had been initially just a bass player, and then he was never going to be the front man or the lead singer. But then in this final incarnation, we'd gone from being a trio, a power trio, without any of the skills of the Police. So, hey, there's a recipe. There's a formula there. Well, actually, no. Brent had the chops. I would put Brent as a drummer, right up there with Stuart Copeland, anytime. He's a very talented drummer. And if it weren't for him, I don't think we could have even grown the band the way we did, because it wouldn't have held up long enough for us to have time to evolve, to a point where we had something decent to say, So he was always the great asset to the band. We realized that as a trio, we were very limited.
Sure.
So we finally talked John into it, and we were already booked to play live on the local college radio station. They appreciated that we had this new thing put together and we had new material, and they were ready to have us on the air. It was April 1st, 1979.
Oh, wow.
And we didn't have a name yet, so they kept asking, like, what do you call it? Well, we're not sure what we're going to be this time, and we just started writing down all these names. Oh, horrible, stuff, but stuff that we could joke about. And it was down to where it was going to be the Elastic Waist Band.
Oh, God.
You don't like that one? It's kind of got that reference to like the Strawberry Alarm Clock, the Elastic Waist Band.
Okay.
And then, but then along the same line of thinking was that we need something that's weighty. It's got that, like the Elastic Waistband, it has that weight to it, and yet on the other hand, it's completely ridiculous. Mm-hmm. So it's imagining, like, in a very serious way, like the association, the embarrassment. It's got that weight to it, and yet on the other hand, it's just trashing your band. It's just immediately like, what? You're just writing yourself off. You're just telling everybody that you're not serious. Everybody recognized the duality of that. And it's like, yeah. If we get in a tight situation and we need a way out of it, it's like we can offer up the name as it's like our get out of jail free card, Well, we're the Embarrassment. Here you go. Should have known.
At the curb and he opens the hood. He's on the main track and he thinks that's good. He thinks that's good. He's on the main track and he thinks that's good. He's on the main track and he thinks that's good. I'm going on a sex drive. I'm going on a sex drive. Sex drive. Sex drive.
What was your songwriting like? I mean, how did you write? Did you write together as a group?
Well, as I recall, it's interesting because I don't think we had a reference. We didn't know anybody else that was doing what we were doing, or, we didn't have family heritage or experience to know, like, how much are we supposed to be working at this? We just knew that this meant so much to us that we needed to be putting in every hour that we could, or every minute. We were just living for the band and the potential of the band at that point. I mean, I remember going to my part-time job as a clothing salesperson, and times would be when certain hours a day, the store would be pretty quiet, and I would be just writing lyrics on note paper in the department, just because it was in my head. I'm not sure how I resolved that with the fact that there'd be Muzak playing, over the intercom all the time. But somehow, if I had an idea in my head, I just start writing out at least the lyrics, whether I had a melody or not. But sometimes I'd end up with a full set of song lyrics, enough to then bring into the band, or of course, I also put a lot of time in by myself with my guitar, and I would try to write the structure of the song. At that point, I had the strong belief, and I think we all acknowledged this. The important thing was the song having an integrity. That song should work from one person sitting down and strumming it out and singing it. You should know that, okay, that's a song. We can do something with that. But then the band would take that kind of an idea, and when we were all together, we'd spend all these hours trying to find the right setting. With a person like Brent on drums, a lot of times it's like, okay, I got an idea for a groove. I got an idea. Here's some, because he had so much fun playing, and he was such a musical drummer with a background in piano. So we'd let him, show us some really cool beat, and you could always count on him to come up with a really cool beat, something he had fun playing, and then we could just kind of find our way and join in on that. We would always make sure for the record, we don't jam. We don't jam because jamming implies that, that we're a group of competent musicians who know how to kind of spontaneously innovate and impress you with their musicality. You're not going to get that from me. So we weren't jamming. We were, taking the time to make a whole lot of noise and start to shape it. With all that time involved, we definitely got better at playing off of each other. We found our strength.
It's creating with a purpose, right? It's not just sitting down to jam, like you said, right? It's creating with a purpose.
Wow. Yeah. I love that. That's a great point, because that also makes the distinction between jamming and what we were doing, as you say, creating with a purpose. We were experimenting with the goal in mind of, what's going to serve this song idea the best. Because, most of the time, probably not 100%, but most of the time it was all focused on, working out a certain song. And that song may have had a set of lyrics that I brought in, or, already I shouldn't, make it seem like I'm the one that was doing that, because John would also bring in, here's a set of words and I'm going to write some and Brent's going to write some, and we're still going to put them through the same mill, the same process. And we work at it that way. So we always had certain givens to work with and to have it grow from, but, be conscious of those important primary elements of the song and go from there. I can't even think of a case where we would just get together and nobody would have any clue like what they wanted to do. And we would just let's just start playing this. Now that didn't happen. It seemed like there was always the seed of a song idea, and we needed to flesh it out.
What kind of music do you play? Tell me a category. What is the category of your music?
We wouldn't argue in terms of a pop group, pop band.
American rock and roll.
Songs that go calypso and country swing and pure raw garage.
It's kind of like blister pop.
Blister pop, okay.
The Embarrassment was coming up, and you were part of that first American punk movement, really. Kansas doesn't strike me as a hotbed of punk rock, but it seems that there was a pretty prevalent movement there. There was a big scene there. How did you branch out? How did this sort of work for you guys?
Well, I don't think we were wholly accepted as punk. And I could cite some specific cases of that.
Then allow me to correct it. Say like you were at the dawn of what became college rock.
Yeah. And for that, we were very fortunate to have Lawrence, Kansas, just 150 miles up the road, which in terms of the regions out here, that's nothing, that's easy access to. But for ourselves in Wichita, which is the largest city in Kansas, people might think that Kansas City should be considered that, but most of Kansas City is in Missouri, for those who are not of the Great Plains. So Wichita, is not the capital, but the largest city in Kansas. And yet we couldn't find kindred spirits really that left us being in this sort of misfit clique. Mm-hmm. There wasn't a support for that. We had to kind of scour the town, and in that era, in the late 70s, that meant putting some flyers up in the record stores. We were insisting that Wichita could have a punk scene. Mm-hmm. And so, if you want to help us kind of start this in motion, show up to our first gig, which is at a rented apartment clubhouse somewhere, not even where we lived, but somewhere else that would, let us have this ridiculous get together.
people, you don't know how much I hurt. 2, 3, 4. Valerie works in the Opal's home, yeah, and wishes she was anywhere but Oklahoma. She hates the moans and the smell of the crime. She hates the groans and the Italy, yap, 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 yap. I don't care for old people, very, very old people. I don't care for old people, and neither does she. Oh, people, you don't know how much I hurt. 2, 3, when they're hitting on 80, they don't think too clearly. She cusses them but doesn't worry, cause they can hear me. Medicare, Medicaid, make the shade. Resign, it's fine, all expense paid. I don't care for old people, very, very old people. I don't care for old people, and neither does she. That was called Song for Val.
Between 77 and 79, you know, it was catching on. So by then we could attract people to a club or a bar, a tavern, at least a bar. And that was a big break. But Lawrence, Kansas was even better because they had a really influential radio station, I think, because it could also serve the Kansas City area. It's only about 30 miles difference between Lawrence and Kansas City, and Lawrence is just a college town for KU, Kansas University, and they had already been recognized as a really great music town, and so there were other new wave and punk bands there already, and sometimes people thought we were from Lawrence because we ended up playing there so often. I mean, that was our home away from home once we started going there. They'd give us great, airplay. We could end up like #1 on their playlist, above REM and above major label pushed kind of new wave stuff. So it was amazing to us. Like, wow, why are we, we're so well received in Lawrence. And punk fans, punk listeners would probably come out to our shows in Lawrence just because they could appreciate that we touched on some of the punk ethic, but I guess we were unpredictable enough to be cool with the punk crowd, because they could see that we weren't putting on any airs. We weren't a fashion trend band. We didn't care about a look, and we could play really hard, when we thought that was the thing to do. So I think in this Great Plains regional setting, the punk crowd appreciated that. But by the time we were putting out a second record and having it reach people in California, let's say, we saw that our press went from, the first record shows all this potential of it. Wow, a punk band coming out of Kansas, who would have thought? This is great. And then we put out our EP, and we show a much more varied side of what our writing is all about, and how we like to go in different directions, and they immediately trashed it. It's like, that's it. So much for what we thought was coming out of Kansas, and they probably had to wait a little bit for some more properly punk bands that were maybe Kansas City or Lawrence. Lawrence produced the Mortal Micronauts. Actually, we took them under our wing at first because they were so much younger than us. They were like underage to be even in the 18 and up tavern. And yet they'd put together this really energetic, more punky band, and they were writing original songs. So they started opening for us, and then, they became, they had a long run. So even they were probably considered more of a legitimate punk band from Kansas than we were.
Do you consider the Embarrassment the forerunner of some of these bands that came after it, even REM to a large extent?
Well, REM was on the same circuit that we were on. So in fact, we were supposed to play a show with them in Kansas City where they would have been the headliner at the time. And they got us taken off the bill. So
Why?
I don't know. There are different versions of why, there speculation about, to hear it from the side of like the the loyal Embarrassment fans of that region at that time were all, pissed off at REM saying,
they're afraid to let the Embarrassment, play ahead of them because they'll blow them off the stage, So, it would have been great to kind of cross paths more. I didn't even see REM until the late '80s when I was in England with Big Dipper playing in the same city. But we thought we knew we were playing the same circuit and trying to get the same radio stations airplay. We were jealous of the fact that they knew enough to like have these New York connections and be guided and advised and helped by New York industry types or whatever. So we thought, well, obviously that's doing them a lot of good. We don't have. How come we don't have something like that? Well, because you're staying in Wichita and you're not willing to leave and go anywhere. So it's kind of like, well, that's the trade-off. We're a Wichita band, and we're not ashamed. We're kind of proud of that, and we kind of want to bring. We're ambassadors for Kansas wherever we go, and if people are willing to, not already write us off or have their mind made up about something, let us show you this is what we do in Wichita and in Kansas. We're not saying it's anything better or anything different, but Kansas was just as likely to be able to produce this kind of art as anywhere else.
What I found with your band is there's a particular sound that I really like, and it's not one consistent sound, probably because there are different songwriters, each bringing everything to the table. It's really refreshing. And I say this all the time on this podcast. It's embarrassing at this point, but it still sounds really relevant. There's a lo-fi quality to it, absolutely. But I also think that's indicative of the time. In the late 70s, early 80s, you weren't going into a multi-track recording studio with tens of thousands of dollars.
No, we were always on a very limited budget. We were in some good studios in some cases, but the studio served its purpose there. But on the other hand, a lot of what we did was on somebody's home studio 8-track recorder or even just recorded on a cassette deck at a live performance. And eventually, because different people were looking for different ways to package and release stuff and try to include things that maybe had not been properly recorded, so they would dig deeper. So, when you hear our catalog, there's some stuff that's really, really lo-fi. And then there's some stuff that we thought was pretty darn well recorded, but still without benefit of even a producer. I mean, we were pretty much always just self-produced. So we were trusting our instincts on, we're going to have to keep this pretty simple, and we're pretty good and consistent about it live, so we ought to be able to just reproduce that in the studio.
God Help Us is a full-length album from 1990, Bar None Records, proper producer, the whole nine. But prior to that, it seems like there were singles and EPs and one EP. Am I right? There was no real full-length prior to that, or was there?
Well, the closest thing to a full-length was Death Travels West, and so we ended up referring to it as a mini album.
Okay.
It was the follow-up to the EP. It was meant to be a full album, but we had a very limited budget. We were able to use a good studio to kind of follow up and actually improve. We thought we were improving on what we'd done with the EP, which was in a good studio, but didn't have to take as long, so it was affordable. So Death Travels West was meant to further that, but frankly, we were at a point where we were getting road weary, and we weren't able to put as much time into developing the material. So we really felt like we had to limit the number of songs we recorded, and I guess we didn't really care. Like, well,
why should we care how long or short this is? Let's just put out the songs that we want to put out. And, it was on this Lawrence label, Fresh Sounds, which had kind of built itself up over those years to where we thought, okay, well, at least we're not just entirely putting this out ourselves. We can hand it over to Fresh Sounds, and now they've kind of learned how to distribute and market and stuff like that. So that'll help, and it did. That whole Bar None experience was more of an opportunity based on what had happened in the subsequent years. It was like, well, we get a second chance. We can actually, maybe go in and do something the right way that we never got to do before, and sort of suggest, like, well, this is kind of the direction that we might be going if we were to continue now as a band. This is how things would be different. We'll just like show people kind of where we're at right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a mixed results.
There are the 3 records that you can stream: Heyday, Blister Pop, and God Help Us. And I got hung up on Heyday and Blister Pop.
Yeah, Heyday's got some real obscure stuff in it too, because that was a fun way to be able to include some things that were otherwise never going to be heard when that was put together. But also Heyday suffers from some inferior remixing and inferior mastering, unfortunately. So the best recordings that are included on Heyday sound better as the vinyl reissues from Last Laugh Records, because that restores the proper mixes of those songs from the EP, not so much from the first 45, but from the EP and Death Travels West. Those songs lost something on Heyday.
Huh.
And they were actually complete. Every one of those was remixed from scratch. It lost a lot of the low end, and that's not good, because the band's, the total effect relies a lot on the bass part and the low end, and a lot of people picked up on that right away and complained about it, and there was nothing we could do. But because Heyday was still the most accessible collection of our songs, so we just had to live with that.
What he does is really good nuance seance. His fiance, easy for you to say, Doc. What he does is an artistic party, narcissistic party, artistic party. She has a book on the subject of beer in her hand. I believe I've walked into a party, artistic party, narcissistic party, artistic party, narcissistic party, artistic party, party.
How did you find out about the documentary, and are you excited to see it?
Oh yeah, I'm excited. Well, we've known, we thought it was just gonna fizzle out, because it started in 2006 when we had our last full reunion show and played the way we were used to playing, and in fact, I don't think the 2006 reunion shows, of which there were 3, 2 in Wichita and then a final one in Lawrence, because even though Wichita was our hometown, Lawrence was kind of the place. So the original filmmaker, Dan Featherston, had already approached us about his movie idea. He was a young musician himself, and in an indie band out in New York, and getting ready to do some touring and stuff and making records. And I don't remember now how he discovered the Embarrassment, but somehow it became enough of an obsession for him that he was determined he was going to make a documentary along the lines of the one he had seen and appreciated about the Minutemen, and which I still have never seen. But that was going to be his kind of model, and he started we met him because he wanted to start interviewing us on video and whatever he could do. Young guy, just very enthusiastic, and we appreciated. I mean, we appreciated the attention, because at that point, I don't know what everybody individually was doing, but we certainly had no ambitions of doing anything together musically. I think we got to talking about how he thought it would be really cool for the idea of the documentary if he could, get us to play again and put together maybe insisted that he was serious enough that he could put together a camera crew, and he would videotape whatever performance we could do, and he would use that as the basis of a documentary. And, I could be totally wrong about this chain of events, but it seems like that's what got the ball rolling on putting together a reunion show at the time. But we hadn't done a show since around like 1990.
Wow.
We decided to give it our best shot. So Dan Featherston he followed through. He did an incredible amount of videotaping and a bunch of interviews. He was very serious at the time. But then, that passed, and a few years went by, and he found a job and got out of the music business himself. And we all just figured, that's the way those things go. It doesn't, most film projects don't get finished. And then along comes this younger guy, Danny, who was coming out of the Wichita area, as opposed to Dan in New York. And all of a sudden, Danny had his own idea. So then there were two separate filmmakers, the one who had already kind of gone through it and wasn't going to finish it. And then Danny with his new ambition and youth and all that. And he starts checking into everything. And he came to learn, much to his surprise, well, Danny, you're not the first guy who's been trying to make a movie about the band. It actually has, you have a predecessor. But then eventually here, the two of them got together and realized that, maybe if we pool our resources and our abilities, we could actually get this done. So it was still hard to believe that they would actually pull it off. There's just too many roadblocks and all this stuff. So
filmmaking, any creative endeavor, is not for the weak at heart.
No, but they actually did. I think they really had this strong belief and vision and determination. I mean, I hope this is like the beginning of a career for both of them. I think it was a big step to like have a finished film distributed, because maybe that's going to open the door for these dreams that they have. And we've just been felt so honored, that they're putting that much work and effort in. Why us? How did you, how'd you choose us? I can kind of understand with Danny, because he's from here. So he felt, an affinity once he discovered the band. He thought it was cool that this happened here in his town. But Dan Featherston, being from New York, I don't understand how he singled us out, and decided, this band needs to be looked at a little closer and shared with more people.
Good music, it transcends time. And I think that's what the Embarrassment is. It's just fucking good music.
Wow.
And that's why this guy in New York, it resonated with him, resonated with me just recently. I'm a middle-aged fucking guy.
Yeah, you're not supposed to discover new music.
The documentary is premiering at the end of the month. By the time I put this up, I'll put it up on Wednesday, the 28th. The documentary goes out. It's going to be premiered on the 30th. Will the Embarrassment be playing a live show?
Oh, yes, on the 30th.
Sweet.
So that's what I'm immersed in now. I mean, well, I don't normally have music as a regular part of my routine because I'm a visual artist full time. So now I have Embarrassment music is part of my daily routine. So that's what I'm doing is trying to have a disciplined approach to relearning the songs, because now it's been 16 years again.
I was just going to say that. Yeah.
But hey, I'm used to that. Every 16 years. I did have, like, the last 4 years of incorporating music into my life was really rewarding. A labor of love, putting together an album of my friend Jeff's songs. So I got a little bit of writing credit because he's very generous in that way. He let me help write some extra verses and occasional things, but mostly he had this whole collection of demos that he'd been writing, and I was able to call in the services of the guy who first recorded The Embarrassment, who still has a regular habit of doing music, but just for love of music. He doesn't do it for money, but he has a studio at home and he loves to work on projects that he enjoys. So he got pulled in to help me put this together. And so it's been kind of a virtual project. Most of the time, the musicians have all been in separate states, putting this together. And a lot of the bass playing is actually done by the same guy who's going to be playing bass for this Embarrassment show, because Ron Klaus is not available.
Oh,
but we're telling everybody up front. That's the reality of it. But he's somebody that stepped in the more latter days of Big Dipper.
Okay.
And so he's well known to us. Tom Brewitt playing bass. So he played on a lot of these songs of Jeff's. It's finally out, but it's out just kind of like on streaming platforms and on our Bandcamp page. It's called Chucky Fume. That's the artist name, because it's Jeff's alter ego, and the album's called Thoughts from the Universe. But I just had so much fun. It was so rewarding to work on it. It was very emotional. There's some really deep felt writing on it. It's very personal to Jeff. It's the kind of songwriting that I was never mature enough to do. And so I really admire that Jeff did that. And it's just been so surprisingly positive to do that.
Awesome.
I like the way it turned out.
Well, definitely link to that as well. And I'm definitely going to listen to it. Bill, I will let you go. I've taken up way too much of your time, and I appreciate the time you've given me, and I thank you for the music. And I'm so thankful again to Mark at Bardon for turning me on to it. A middle-aged guy finding new music is not easy to do, especially new music that resonates.
Now I'm feeling inspired, and I need to find something new. Actually, I may have. Well, it doesn't have to be new in the context of music. It's just new to you, right? So,
correct. Yeah.
Low Straitjackets.
I don't.
Not familiar with them, right? Like, they've got a huge cult following, but and they're also known quite a bit as the backing band when Nick Lowe goes on tour with a band. That's his band.
Okay.
They're always wearing Mexican wrestling masks.
I will give them a go as well. Again, Bill, thank you so much for everything.
Oh, thank you. My pleasure.
I think the timing is fortuitous.
Cool.
All right, man.
Good luck.
Thank you very much, Bill.
All right, take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Many thanks to Bill and the other guys in The Embarrassment. The songs you heard on this podcast included a cover of Don't Stop Till You Get Enough, the songs Sex Drive, Song for Val, and Celebrity Art Party. You can stream The Embarrassment on all your favorite streaming services. You also heard a clip from the show Letterkenny, available to stream on Hulu. Be sure to keep your eyes open for the documentary We Were Famous, You Don't Remember, coming to a theater or streaming service soon. Special thanks to Mark Lipsitz at Barnon Records. Please be sure to check out the episode notes. We'll have links there for all the stuff that you're probably scratching your head about now. Abandoned Albums was recorded at Thunder Love Studios.
Produced and written by Keith R. Higgins.
Engineered and mixed by Steve Beasley. Edited by A.J. Royce.
Original music by Mike Pellegrino.
If you like what you've heard, please be sure to subscribe and leave us a rating. It really does help. Thanks for listening.
At Twitter, we are at Abandoned Albums, and on Instagram, we are at Abandoned_albums.
Grazie.
Bailey Leaf, Rob Janicki, S.W. Loudon, Michael Janicki, Steve Beasley, Mike Pellegrino, Therina Bella, Peyton Janicki, and of course, our executive producer,
Rufus Thunderlove.
And now, until we meet again next time, I remain as always obediently yours.
Abandoned Albums is a production of Paw Print Media.